past, like we've talked about this, like 20 years, and on a greater scale, like 200 years, it's been a very earth element dominant. And so it's really easy to kind of gauge with that energy because it's all about like what's happening physically. So a lot of people were going through like physical stuff, you know, either physical healing, you know, they're focused on whatever, their living situation, their abundance, their job, like all these very like practical physical things. And now where we have like Pluto and Aquarius, Jupiter and Gemini, like all this like air energy, it's shifting where there's this huge focus and this huge change going on with the thoughts and perspectives and mental bodies. And I just don't think people were prepared. Yeah. I mean, that's what we've been saying for years is like eventually, like, you know, because if you look at it, it's almost like up until this point, people could get away with like not really doing the inner work per se. As long as they were doing the outer work, they were like making it. Yeah. And now it's all shifted
to you got to do the inner work.
And now it's like, oh shit, it's not working anymore.
Yeah, it's not. And that's kind of interesting too, because I started to read Lauren Gorgo's article. We got to talk about other things, and we may cover that at the end. But what she was saying, like with the start of this article that she had shared for the month, she was pretty much saying, and she had like has been leading up to this the last few months with her posts, but pretty much with the 6/6 portal and the new moon, and then she mentioned about the solstice and the Capricorn full moon, is that for people that are on the path, that it's actually going to be, and we've been working to this point these last few years, she really said since Gemini season of 2021, which is just interesting, that would have been right after Mom left, this kind of energy of slowly, but now we're at this point where people that are on the path are no longer going to be connected to the collective consciousness.
Interesting.
So we're pulling out completely so that we're in the world but not of it. That's something she's been saying a lot, and this month she kind of like sealed the deal in terms of like she's been talking about death and rebirth body and being connected to the diamond mind or brain, which is just connected to Mom on like the God consciousness level, and said something along the lines of like we are now like having these experiences as the mother. So I feel like that's a big shift of out of that mental energy, like what she's saying, physical to mental, is that if you've done that work, you're going to be broken off from the collective consciousness and you're strong enough to not keep getting sucked back in. And the interesting part of how it all lines up with Mom is that she left in 2021. We've kind of been moving into this mental phase. And it's that Mom was such a genius that she knew like this energy was changing from earth to air. And she knew she can't do that work for us. She can't help us with our thought loop. She can't help us with our internal journey. She could only do the physical aspect, show us how to do it physically. But then she left before the mental phase because there's nothing she can teach us about that. She didn't have ego. Right. And that's a very personal, internal journey for each person. So you cannot have a teacher really through that besides advice like bypassing the thoughts and things that she taught us. But other than that, she can't tell you how to break out of
That's
those
a good
things.
point. And I thought about that because it was like she gave us all the information, like all the programmings, how they work, how to identify them, but she couldn't, like Hope said, like her role was to take on all the physical experiences that all of humanity experiences in some way, so that she could transform basically the emotions, the wounding, the trauma, the energy associated with these experiences to ultimately give us that example, that role model example of like, this is how you move through these experiences. But she could never transform the ego program mind.
Right. She can only identify it.
Right. So we are the first technically to go through the complete ego death process because she couldn't do that bit for us.
And I don't even feel like, now that hearing you say that, like, I feel there's a part of her that didn't know what it was going to look like after she had left, because she was like, the barrier between like the ego going full-fledged down here
Yeah.
and like being fully out of control, like she was single-handedly barricading that, but when
Yeah.
she left, that kind of came off, and that's why we've seen the last 3 years people are saying COVID and the isolation.
Yeah.
Sure, but it's really like the last 3 years, it's very much like doing the mental work, and she's did
Yeah.
the best she could to like warn us in advance what was coming, telling us
Yes.
about the ego, identifying the programming. So when I'm not here, this is how you know it's not real and what to do about it, but I can't climb inside your soul and body and take out your ego. You know, she could
Right.
only guide us so far.
Yeah.
And she knew that when she left, the ego was going to do things and tricks and whatever when she left, and all she could do was prepare us for
Yeah.
that moment, you know?
Yeah, but you know, and she always, you know, everybody's said the same thing, that like there would reach a certain point where that split would happen, that split of consciousness. So if we look at this pattern of like, we've been doing more, not that we haven't been doing the internal work, but we've had to basically go through a lot of physical experiences up until this point to learn how to transform, to learn how to heal, like to get our bodies physically and emotionally prepared for what we call the higher self coming in. Mm-hmm. You know, because when the higher self comes in, there can't be ego in the body. Like, yeah, you're going to have remnants of it, but you can't be in full blown in the mind or else the higher self can't come in. So I feel like we've been going through all these like physical experiences and just these learning lessons and trials to like get to these points. And then those that are able to now like have that higher self come in, override the ego to, you know, to the most extent possible. That's the separation, because you're right, or what Lauren Gorgo said is that would mean we are disconnected from the collective now, because we're operating in an entirely new consciousness network, not the collective consciousness, because they're all in the mind. So if we're elevating past the mind and now we're operating in this new operating system, which is the same downloads that I've been getting, we won't be connected to them.
Nope.
So now the funniest part about that is that the collective for the first time is going to have to face their own energy.
Right. And it's each person's choice whether you're in the mind and you're in lower thought and you will stay connected to the collective consciousness or break out of that, hence the Gemini energy, the mental stuff. It's a choice point. And again, that work cannot be done for anybody outside of your individual self. So it's a very personal journey to break away from that consciousness, but it's not to be hard on yourself of like, oh, you have one negative thought, you're connected to that, you're never going to escape the collective consciousness. It's just more self-awareness, and we need to be prepared and like know that this is happening so we can choose to not engage with that energy. And I feel like that's why even lately, like going into 2024, but even the last few years, I feel like a lot of people watching this, and even myself, be like, well, it doesn't feel like we've been kind of getting ready to sever this connection with it's been very hard. Yeah. Like physically for people, a lot of upgrades, people getting sick, like events happening, and people wondering, you know, is this new Earth? Like, I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. Yeah. And I feel like it's been leading up the last 3 years to this severing that's happening now, because you're going to get sick when your body is no longer getting fed by the matrix. You're going to feel not great while your body's unplugging and you're getting hooked up to now source connection. Yeah. We've only known being fed by the matrix our whole lives, you know?
Yeah.